We all agree, at least in theory, that taking care of ourselves is vital. We're told to practice self-care, show ourselves patience, and approach our own struggles with kindness. It sounds wise, even noble, but here's the real challenge: actually doing it. Because when the moment arrives, when life gets overwhelming or a mistake triggers our inner critic, it feels absurdly unnatural to pause and offer ourselves compassion. Instead of gentleness, we instinctively reach for judgment. Instead of stillness, we drown in panic. Instead of grace, we summon discipline. And so the harsh voice returns. Get it together. Keep going. Don't be weak. Why is it that we can extend warmth to a friend in need, listen with patience to a loved one, offer comfort to a crying child, but when it comes to ourselves, we become our own unrelenting drill sergeants? To bridge that divide, here's a thought experiment. One deceptively simple but deeply transformative. Imagine that alongside your adult responsibilities, you are also in charge of looking after a small child, a 5-year-old, fragile, tender, easily overwhelmed, and that child is you. Not symbolically, not metaphorically, but truly, the 5-year-old you once were, now with you at all times. You don't go to the meeting alone. That small child comes too. You don't walk into the networking lunch solo. They are tagging along, nervously watching you navigate small talk with strangers. When you pick up the phone to call a difficult client, it's not just your adult self handling it. The child is listening in, unsure, scared of saying the wrong thing. When you're late on a deadline or fumbling through traffic, they're there too, feeling every spike of stress, every tremble of fear, and wondering if everything's going to be okay. It's a quiet shift in perspective, but it changes everything. Because when we view our day-to-day challenges through the eyes of that small child, we begin to see just how much pressure we place on ourselves. Without pause, without rest, without compassion. The things we've normalized, overworking, overcommitting, endlessly performing, suddenly feel impossibly unfair. A 5-year-old wouldn't survive the emotional onslaught we routinely endure, and yet, part of us, that part, is still trying. We've forgotten how often we wear a mask. The composed adult face we present to the world hides an interior filled with weariness, insecurity, and longing. And when those inner pains go unacknowledged, when the child inside us is ignored, they don't disappear. They resurface in migraines, in irritability, in unexplained sadness, in lashing out, in a persistent sense that something is off. We think we're just being lazy, or dramatic, or weak. But what's actually happening is this. We're carrying a level of emotional strain that no one, certainly no 5-year-old, was ever meant to bear alone. And here's the strange truth. We are often far better at caring for actual children than for ourselves. Put us in front of a vulnerable child, and most of us instinctively soften. We speak gently, we anticipate their needs. We notice if they haven't eaten, if they're tired, or if they look scared. We say things like, "You've had a big day, haven't you?" Or, "It's okay to be scared, it's a lot to handle." But when the same feelings show up in us, our response is starkly different. We push harder, we scold, we shame. Why? Because we've forgotten that we're not just adults with calendars and careers. We are also, and always, the sum of every stage we've lived through. That fragile 5-year-old is still here, still hoping to be seen, still wondering if they're allowed to rest. In our culture, we often glorify independence. We reward self-sufficiency. We celebrate those who power through pain, who don't flinch under pressure, who hustle, strive, achieve, and who rarely ask for help. It's a value system that mistakes silence for strength, denial for resilience. But deep beneath the surface, most of us are carrying invisible burdens that would make a child buckle at the knees. And in truth, a child is buckling inside us. It's easy to forget this when you're staring at a spreadsheet or trying to appear confident in a job interview or rushing to pick up the kids. But if you listen closely, you can hear the younger self inside you, confused, tired, scared, and so often unheard. Let's return to the image from earlier, the 5-year-old version of you, not as a metaphor, but as a real psychological presence. Imagine them more fully now, their wide eyes, their timid posture, the way they look around rooms, unsure who is safe, the way they flinch at raised voices or sink when they sense disappointment, the way they try so hard to be good, to please, to not be a problem. Now imagine that this child has had to grow up fast, far too fast. They weren't just playing with blocks or watching cartoons. They were trying to decode adult tension, trying to stay invisible during fights, trying to be the peacemaker, the fixer, or maybe just trying to be good enough to be loved. This child learned to survive, not thrive. And though we may have grown physically and intellectually, many of us are still living from the wounds and strategies that this child developed. When we freeze during confrontation, or panic at a late reply, or overwork ourselves to exhaustion, it is often this inner 5-year-old reacting. Not because they are dramatic, but because no one ever explained they were safe now. No one ever came to take over for them. What reparenting really means. Reparenting doesn't mean rejecting your actual parents. It doesn't mean rewriting history. It means finally offering the care, structure, tenderness, and boundaries that your younger self never consistently received. It means becoming the adult that little you always needed. And here's the secret. The more we learn to do this for ourselves, the more we stop outsourcing our safety to others. We stop needing romantic partners to save us. We stop expecting friends to read our minds. We stop blaming ourselves for not coping better. We learn to say, I see you, you're overwhelmed. That makes sense. I'm here now. Learning to listen again. Start small. Next time you're anxious, instead of suppressing it, ask yourself, what might the 5-year-old in me be afraid of right now? Next time you feel exhausted but guilty for resting, ask, would I expect a child to keep pushing with no break? Next time you're filled with self-loathing, ask, would I talk to a child this way? This shift doesn't require dramatic rituals. It begins in the quietest of moments, in the pause before you say something harsh to yourself, in the breath you take before pushing past your limits, in the decision to say no when your body is screaming for rest. Understanding the toll of daily life. Modern life isn't gentle. It's loud, fast, and relentlessly demanding. There are emails at midnight, comparison on social media, financial worries, unresolved grief, and the dull ache of loneliness that so many carry but few admit. We're told this is normal, expected even, but normal doesn't mean healthy. And when you see these expectations through the lens of that inner child, everything changes. Imagine a 5-year-old waking up to your schedule. Would you expect them to handle back-to-back meetings, small talk, decision-making, commuting, errands, emotional regulation, and still go to the gym? Of course not. So why do we expect it of ourselves? Because we've stopped recognizing our emotional limits. We've grown numb to our own exhaustion. We've mistaken survival for strength. But just because you're managing doesn't mean you're thriving. Just because no one sees your tears doesn't mean you aren't suffering. The body keeps the score. As trauma expert Bessel van der Kolk once said, the body keeps the score. The inner child, ignored for long enough, will find ways to be heard. Through migraines, insomnia, back pain, irritability, emotional numbness, panic attacks, depression. Not because you are broken, but because something inside you is desperately asking to be seen. And the tragedy is, we often shame ourselves for these symptoms. We say we're weak, we're lazy, we're dramatic. But what if we translated those symptoms instead as signals? Signals from the younger parts of ourselves that have been carrying too much for too long. The healing practice of gentle curiosity. If there is one skill we must relearn, it's this: gentle curiosity. Instead of reacting with judgment, we respond with questions. What am I feeling right now? Where is this coming from? What might I need that I'm not giving myself? If a small child were feeling this, what would I do for them? This is not indulgence. This is responsibility. Final reflection of part 2. Every day we are entrusted with the care of a very sensitive inner child. We forget this, not because we don't care, but because we were never taught to remember. And yet, when we bring that child into awareness, with tenderness, patience, and fierce protection, something begins to shift. We stop striving for perfection and begin striving for connection. We stop asking, what's wrong with me? And begin asking, what happened to me? And most of all, we stop believing that we have to earn love and begin remembering that we are love. This is how the healing begins. Not with radical transformations, but with quiet, steady acts of self-kindness that accumulate into something sacred. Safety. You becoming your own safe place. By now, we have met our younger selves, recognized their presence beside us, and begun to appreciate the weight of adult life through the lens of that inner child. But there is more to healing than simply noticing. Part of what we must learn, with sustained compassion, is how to hold space for ourselves in ways we perhaps never experienced when we were younger. This is the essence of inner reparenting. To reparent ourselves means to consciously give the care, understanding, and encouragement to ourselves that we may have lacked. It doesn't imply blaming our parents. They too were shaped by the generations before them. Rather, this process acknowledges that no childhood is perfect and that some of our wounds remain unattended because no one knew how to tend them then. Now, we do. This reparenting begins in small, quiet moments. When we feel overwhelmed, we can learn to say gently to ourselves, "Of course you're tired. This has been a lot today." When we make a mistake, rather than lashing out with internal insults, we can pause and reflect. You're learning. It's okay to fall sometimes. Such phrases may feel strange at first, even artificial, especially if we are used to the inner drill sergeant barking orders and criticism. But over time, this softer voice becomes familiar and incredibly powerful. Think of how we would care for a child who is frightened after a nightmare. We wouldn't yell or demand that they snap out of it. We might sit beside them, rub their back, whisper softly until their breathing slows. The child is still afraid, but they're not alone in it anymore. That's exactly what we can begin to offer ourselves. Company in the fear, not solutions or silencing. Inner nurture also involves setting boundaries, not as punishments, but as containers of safety. We often associate self-compassion with indulgence, but true self-care requires us to protect our energy, say no when we need to, and walk away from what harms us, even if it once seemed desirable. The 5-year-old inside us doesn't need endless pleasure. They need structure, reassurance, and consistency. They need to know they will not be abandoned again, especially not by us. This can be especially challenging for those of us who have grown up equating our value with performance or obedience. The idea of setting boundaries might feel foreign, even selfish. But as we slowly reframe what it means to be kind to ourselves, we come to see that kindness includes fierce advocacy. The loving inner parent does not allow their child to be constantly overworked, unseen, or sacrificed for the sake of harmony. They step in, they speak up, and they listen, deeply, attentively, not just to what we say out loud, but to the quieter cues of exhaustion, tension, or dread. How often do we push ourselves through a social engagement, a demanding task, or a conversation we don't want to have, simply because we think we should? The inner child has no voice in these moments, only feelings, tightness in the chest, a headache, a sudden urge to cry for no reason. Listening to ourselves means learning to tune into those subtle signals and taking them seriously. It also means attending to our joys. The reparenting process isn't just about soothing pain. It's about fostering play, curiosity, and delight. What lights you up? What simple, silly things bring laughter or wonder? For many adults, joy becomes an afterthought, something earned only after exhaustion. But for the 5-year-old inside, joy is the point. Reclaiming it is not frivolous. It's essential. Let this be a new standard, not just productivity, but play. Not just responsibility, but rhythm. We might plan our days not only around work tasks, but also around rituals of comfort, morning walks, music while cooking, a quiet hour with a book, a favorite snack eaten slowly. These are not luxuries, they are lifelines. As we continue this work, we may begin to notice an inner shift. Our default voice becomes less harsh. Our inner world feels less like a battlefield and more like a home. We become more emotionally available, not just to others, but to ourselves. We find that we can stay with discomfort a little longer without spiraling into self-loathing. We begin to trust that we have our own back, even on the hard days. The reparented self isn't a different person. It is simply a more integrated one. The adult and child within are no longer at war, no longer ignoring or overwhelming each other. They have learned, with practice, to coexist, to co-regulate. The adult listens and protects. The child brings softness, creativity, and a sense of wonder. This partnership is sacred. Of course, the work is never done. There will be days when we forget. Days when the old voices shout louder than the new. Days when we slide back into criticism or overwork or neglect. But that too is part of the process. The goal isn't perfection, it's awareness. The moment we notice we've slipped is also the moment we begin again. To reparent the self is a radical act of self-respect. It is not quick, and it is not always easy. But it is healing in the truest sense, a return to wholeness. It allows us to live not from a place of defense, but of groundedness. Not in constant flight from pain, but with a steady presence that can hold the pain and still keep going. The child in us is not a weakness to be hidden. They are the pulse of our aliveness. And when we learn to walk with them, hand in hand, we begin to reclaim our deepest strength. By now, we've come to recognize that within us dwells not only an adult handling life's duties, but also a fragile, tender, often neglected 5-year-old, a symbolic representation of our emotional core. This part of us has been historically denied proper attention, care, and validation. And as we begin to accept their presence, the next step isn't merely to notice them, but to actively build a relationship with them. This isn't a sentimental indulgence or a psychological gimmick. It is a fundamental psychological repair process rooted in the principle of self-reparenting, the conscious act of becoming the nurturing, attuned, and protective caregiver we may never have had, or that we may have lost too soon. 1. Listening. Instead of dismissing. When we experience overwhelm, confusion, or intense emotion, we often rush to suppress it. We may distract ourselves with tasks, numb out with screens or substances, or criticize ourselves for not handling things better. But this emotional volatility is not random or unreasonable. It is the child inside us, trying desperately to get our attention. In reparenting, the first move is simply this: we listen. Imagine pausing midday and asking, "What's bothering you right now? Where in your body do you feel that discomfort? What might the small version of you be afraid of?" At first, this might feel awkward or artificial, but that's only because we've been taught to override our emotional signals. In truth, this inquiry can open a portal to remarkable self-understanding. Maybe the tension in our chest isn't just stress. It's that younger part of us terrified of failing, or feeling unseen, or unworthy. Listening is not problem-solving. It's presence. It says, you are allowed to feel what you feel, and I will not leave you alone in it. 2. Speaking gently. Rewriting the inner dialogue. The way we speak to ourselves is often far harsher than anything we'd say to a friend or a child. We berate ourselves for being slow, not achieving enough, being awkward, overreacting. This internal tone becomes habitual and invisible. But imagine if you overheard someone speaking to a 5-year-old that way. "You're so stupid. You always mess this up. No one likes you. Why can't you be more like them?" It would be horrifying. And yet, we often internalize and repeat these very same scripts, unaware of how damaging they are. Reparenting means catching these scripts midstream and rewriting them. Instead of, "What's wrong with me?" Try, "That was hard, and you're doing your best." Instead of, "I shouldn't be feeling this way," say, "It makes sense that you're upset. Let's figure this out together. This gentle tone isn't weakness, it's emotional maturity. It creates psychological safety, which is the very ground from which true growth becomes possible. 3. Meeting needs before they become crises. A key part of parenting is anticipating needs, not waiting for a meltdown before feeding, resting, or comforting. Reparenting asks the same of us. We can start each day by checking in. Have I eaten nourishing food today? Have I had some movement or time in nature? Am I thirsty? Am I tired? Do I need to talk to someone or take a break from people? Is there something that would bring me joy or calm, even just for 10 minutes? By tuning in regularly, we prevent emotional escalation. We send the message, I see you. You matter. I won't wait until you break down to offer help. This practice transforms life from a series of emergencies into a space of ongoing care. 4. Making space for play, curiosity, and joy. Reparenting isn't only about preventing pain, it's also about reclaiming the simple, essential joys of life that the child in us may have never fully experienced. Children need play. They need moments of laughter, wonder, discovery, and movement, and so do we. As adults, we often deprioritize joy, but it's not optional, it's restorative. Try this. Set aside 30 minutes this week for something purely joyful. Painting, dancing, baking, walking with music. Watch something that made you laugh as a child. Revisit a hobby you used to love but let go of. Allow yourself to feel silly, ridiculous, curious. These are not distractions from your healing. They are its deepest tools. Joy is not the reward after healing. It's part of how we heal. 5. Repairing what was lost, but not through perfection. Often, people turn to inner child work with an unconscious aim to fix everything. To become the perfect parent to their inner child, never missing a need, always responding calmly, always being kind. But that's not possible, and it's not the goal. What children need most isn't perfection, it's repair. They need to know that if a rupture happens, it can be acknowledged and connection can be restored. That someone will apologize, listen, and try again. So when you miss a cue, when you criticize yourself, ignore your needs, or overwork, don't double the pain by shaming yourself for it. Just return. Say, that was a hard moment. I'm sorry I left you alone in that. I'm back now. Every repair builds trust. Over time, the inner child stops expecting abandonment and starts to believe in safety. 6. Creating rituals of self-attunement. Consistency builds safety. That's why children thrive with routines. Bedtime stories, morning rituals, meals at regular times. They come to rely on these rhythms as proof that the world is predictable and they are cared for. As adults, we need this too. Build tiny rituals of care into your week. A check-in journal before bed, a soothing tea after a difficult call, lighting a candle as you start your day, a song you play to remind yourself you're not alone. These moments create rhythm, and within that rhythm, the inner child learns to exhale. Conclusion. The adult who stays. The ultimate goal of reparenting isn't to regress or become self-indulgent. It's to become the kind of adult our younger self always needed. Someone who listens, someone who stays, someone who doesn't disappear in criticism or chaos, someone who says, no matter what you feel, I'm not going anywhere. When we offer ourselves this stability, we change not just our present life, but our past. We bring warmth into cold memories. We write new endings. We grow up, but we don't leave ourselves behind. And in doing so, we break cycles that may have persisted for generations. We become the first in our lineage to say, this pain ends here. With love, not shame. With presence, not abandonment. We don't need to fix our childhood. We just need to stop abandoning ourselves now. And in this practice, the small child within, so long unseen, can finally rest. And the adult